Is it? Yeah, this is good. All right, well, welcome everybody. So my name is Scott Morris. I manage our strategic advocacy team. I've been with MobileIron for just over 5 years now, and I want to just welcome you. So what we wanted to do, and what this presentation is about today, is we wanted to see about establishing a simple framework by which people could expand the conversation around mobility. So quick question, how many of you, has anybody here seen Captain America Civil War? Anybody seen it yet? Okay, anybody not seen Captain America Civil War? Really quick. Anybody committed to not raising your hand today? Okay, outstanding. All right, so it's a great movie, no spoiler alerts, but I really think in some respects, mobility strikes me a little bit. So when you see the movie, this will all make sense. So I'm just gonna seed this for those of you who haven't seen it yet. But it really, in some respects, mobility, especially for those of us that are involved in the middle of it, is this epic battle where there are all kinds of things coming together. There's a lot of fighting going on. A lot of times the issues that we seem to be battling over are small and insignificant. Others of the issues are really monumental and could determine the future of your company. And at the end of the day, there seem to be very few black and whites. So really, it's hard to find somebody in the organization who's right without finding some areas where they're wrong, and vice versa. So what we wanted to do was understand, are there some key components to a mobility journey that our customers go through that we could create a framework around so that we could help with the conversation around mobility? So that you as customers would have some way within your organization to be having more informed conversation up the ladder, down the ladder, across the organization to all the different components that touch mobility. And would that framework in some way, shape, or form help us as your vendor and you as our customer to be able to have a more informed and a rich conversation around mobility as well? And so that's what we've put together. So I basically spent some time, the idea was not originally mine. It started with our old vice president of product and marketing. I came alongside him, started working on this with him. It's had many people in the organization. So I got on the road, met with people face to face. We've been on WebExes, a lot of conversations, and then thousands of hours of work that we've done with customers over the last 5 to 7 years of working with them. And what we've found is that in mobility, there really are kind of 4 phases that any organization goes through. The first one is where we all started, right, with BlackBerry. There were some avant-garde organizations that did a little bit with ActiveSync, managing some early devices pre-iOS, and then sort of dabbled a bit in iOS and some of the precursors to the smartphones for today. And then all of a sudden, when the iPhone finally took off, we had this whole push for email. Some of our more forward-thinking customers got into full device VPN. Some of them were doing certificates for Wi-Fi access. And companies started to try to understand, what are we going to do with a mobile device that's going to add value? So the big push was into email. Once we got email situated and we started to get a sense of where we were going with kind of a full PIM suite with Wi-Fi access and VPN, then companies started to ask the question, well, what do we do with apps? Now, obviously, some companies move faster with apps than others, but once apps came in, what we found was the whole conversation around mobility started to change. And for some companies, they went with a web app. For some companies, they went with a native built app. But in general, applications is where we started to see a significant increase in business value, and the dynamics of mobile really start to take hold in an organization. As people started to figure out applications, now what we saw was the third phase. If you think of it as phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, is where all of a sudden these applications and the access to back-end servers and resources starts to change the way we do process. I can now take a very simple process that perhaps I used to have to get on my laptop and VPN in and do a simple authorization for a workflow. Now I can do that on a mobile device in 30 seconds. And so the way companies are starting to do business, the way they organize their sales organizations, the way they build applications, the way they design processes, and by extension, the way they start to engage with customers is all starting to change. And so that has become a transformative component that mobility has brought to the table. And one of the things that we're seeing now, frankly, I expected that we'd see it a little bit sooner, and I thought maybe it'd be a little more to market by now, is the idea of it not just being mobile first, but endpoint first. So we're seeing endpoints coming together. I think in a couple of years, the conversation will stop being a mobile conversation, and it will be an endpoint conversation as the operating systems come together, and that conversation really becomes moot as to whether it's a laptop, desktop, or if it's on mobile. So one of the things that we wanted to understand in this process is, how does this happen? How does a company move from one phase to the next phase? And so it kind of looks like this. You start with a driver. Everybody's got a reason that they want to get into mobility. Now, this is different than a use case. A use case might be, I want my salespeople to have an iPad. But a driver is really something sort of more internal to who the organization is. Oftentimes it started out as user experience. Anybody read the book Losing the Signal on BlackBerry? Anybody read that when it came out? All right, anybody read a book this year? Anyone? Any readers? Okay, readers are leaders. Let me do all right, that's a free one. So in the book, it was really interesting that one of the driving factors for BlackBerry when it came out was the user experience, right? People loved the ability to do something mobile that they couldn't do before. It was fun for them. Now, the other driver that we see more often than not is business growth. That's what businesses are about. In some way, shape, or form, this is, at the end of the day, either got to help you save money or make money. And the third component in drivers that we saw over and over again was cultural. And if you think about what the iPhone did, it took user experience and the coolness of technology and made it a cultural component. Really, if you think globally, it's starting to infect, certainly here in the United States, in Europe, these devices have redefined how we see culture. Interestingly enough, that was kind of where BlackBerry was as well. It was the same thing. One CEO saw another CEO with a BlackBerry, and he wanted it. Right? It's the same thing with iPhones and iPads. Your CFO shows up, their kids got him an iPad for Christmas. Now they want email on it, and it's our problem to figure out how to make that happen. So those are kind of the drivers. Then, once you understand sort of that in the background that's going on, there's 4 components that we found are a part of every successful mobile deployment. The first one is you need buy-in at the C level. Typically it's going to be your CIO. It can be a CEO, a CTO. Somebody asked me the other day, have I seen the rise of the chief mobility officers? Have we seen the CMO? I have not. I thought we would see it by now. I have not seen that. I think the CIO is still that go-to person for anything technology. And I think with the merging of endpoints, I don't know that we'll ever see a CMO. We will just see a mobily focused chief information officer. So you need a CIO that's been bought in. Somebody in the executive team has got to own this thing and be the champion for the initiative. Then the second thing is you need competency across your IT department. Right? That's going to include both the leadership as well as at a system engineering level. People have to understand how to do this. The third component is security. Now security, and we'll talk not about this today, but we sort of have this as a conversational component. One of the things that we found again and again and again is that security is typically a no organization, right? And by extension, IT becomes a no organization. Mobile changes that. Mobile enables IT to become a yes organization, and it enables security to start to become a champion and a different engaged sort of party in the conversation. How they work with you will start to change. They will have to go through a different set of assumptions as they put security components into place. And so it's really interesting to watch the change in that role as well. Now the fourth component, and forgive the build there, the fourth component is the use case. Now this typically comes from the business unit. There are some excitable CEOs out there that will drop a use case on you now and again. But this typically comes from the business unit. They need something accomplished. Once they need something accomplished, something has to happen in your environment, and we call this adoption. Mobile has to be adopted. We're going to look at what are the 3 components that go into the use case, right? So it's the use case itself. We'll talk a little bit about some of the hurdles that you need to overcome, and then how you put a solution together for that. With the adoption in place, one of 2 things happen. Either you experience business value or you don't. The third option would be that you don't experience business value for a number of reasons, but there's the potential for business value. And if there's the potential for business value, or if you experience business value, then you're going to see that feedback into the organization. You're going to see the business units, you're going to see the CIO, the security organization, and obviously IT are all then going to begin to accelerate what they want to do, the number of use cases will increase, the scope of adoption will increase, and your mobility initiative expands. And we see this played out over and over and over again in terms of a process around adopting mobility. We have 30 minutes today in total. I don't know how many of those we have left, but we can't cover everything for each one of these components. So one of the takeaways at the end is we do have a longer version of this if it's something that would be helpful for your organization. I'll give you my email, happy to have you reach out, and somebody at MobileIron can come out and walk through this maybe with your executives or with your IT team. But for today, what I want to do is take a few minutes and focus on a couple of components. What does the conversation look like across those three phases for your CIO and then also at the IT level? And that's what we'll have time for today. So at the CIO level, there are, in each one of the phases, there are a number of different things that your CIO is working through. If we focus on what I think sort of is the most interesting to me in some respects, it's really this last component right here, which is the first thing your CIO is trying to get their head around, is all the confusion that's now entered their world. Right? Their models, excuse me, sorry guys, their models and what they're used to working with are all starting to change. They have to deal with the balance between user experience and security. They have to start wrestling with terms like native versus third party. They have to start understanding different HR policies for a corporate device versus a BYOD device. And frankly, these are things at the CIO level, many of them have never had to think about before. So there's a lot of uncertainty. We had a CIO from a large customer that reached out to us, and the CIO said, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you come out and spend some time with me and help me understand how do I get value from your product? They just really had no idea what something like this would do. So it's a change in concept for the CIO. Now, as you move from just doing your basic installation, you're getting the kind of your PIM up and running, people have access on Wi-Fi. Now you've got apps coming into the environment. At this point, the CIO has got to start thinking about the organization. The organization changes with mobility. You have a number of different components that typically exist in their own world. You have networking, you have messaging and your exchange environments. You have security, you have certificates that may or may not exist with security but have their own infrastructure. You have your VM environment or your server infrastructure. Everybody does their own thing. There's a little bit of communication back and forth. Your CIO now has to deal with the fact that all these people have to engage and interact in real time. And they have to do it in a way that works together. So your VM team doesn't understand the network considerations, that doesn't understand the demands of a mobility deployment, and each one of these things creates confusion. It changes the way the organization functions, and the CIO's got to get their head around that. The other thing that I asked a set of customers, I said, if you could tell your CIO one thing, what would it be? So I'd tell him this. He says, come up with a 3-year vision for where mobility is going to go. Put together a phased plan on how you're going to roll that out, and then market the hell out of it. So one of the things that the CIO has got to do that is a little different than what they've done in the past is they have to become a master communicator. They have to become somebody that drives a passion for mobility across the organization, and they've got to start to do it now for the rest of their lives. This is also a unique change for them. And then finally, what comes out of that direction and organizational change is what we call the Mobility Center of Excellence, or the MCOE. This is a combination of networking, of messaging, of exchange, of your network, of your mobility administrators, of security, of HR. Each one of these people comes and gets a seat at the table, and they are all critical to make unified decisions around what mobility is going to look like, and each one of them has critical input for this. By the time you get to the place where you're starting to transform your business, you'll probably not only have the MCOE, but you'll have a steering committee above it. A CIO, a CFO, or an HR type executive. You'll probably have somebody in there from the security team at a very, very high level that can deconflict for the MCOE when things get confusing. And they will get confusing. There will be decisions that they will need help with. And then of course the Holy Grail. At this point, what the vision that your CIO is wrestling with is how innovation is now existing at the outside boundaries of your organization, but the management of that exists internally. And again, this is a different mindset for CIOs to wrestle through, and it's one of the places that we see huge opportunity for growth. Okay, IT side, what are you going to do with all of this? Well, there's a number of different places. Your focus in terms of each stage where you're focusing on email and then you start to shift to application when it takes place. Let me tell you what you're going to struggle with. In the email component, as you're getting there, my assumption is many of you are there. Get out of the way for you, sorry guys. Many of you are already going to be there, but really it's a choice between native and third party. That winds up being one of the places we see people really, really struggle. It seems ironic, but your security team is still very involved. They don't have a lot of experience with mobility. They want to lock everything down. They want it to be just like BlackBerry. So for you, this is going to be a major issue in terms of helping them understand the difference there. The other part of it is the unpredictability. I worked with a financial services organization, one of the biggest and best that exists, and they had no idea how to handle ActiveSync. There were errors that they saw that were happening, there were user behaviors, they couldn't understand what was going on. None of it was predictable, none of it followed a pattern that they could put into a syslog and weed out and make sense of. And that happens exponentially across all of the different components of your organization as you work to get mobility up and running. Now, when you get into the application part of it, really what starts to happen, you get an app out there, maybe two. This is a huge win. Now you have real demand for applications. At this point, you have what we call code chaos. So now what people are wrestling with is everybody's putting their own SDKs into the application. They have their own code structure. They have their own way of doing security. They have their own way of developing the application, their own standards to develop to. They have their own way of wanting to deploy it. They have their own way of wanting to manage it. They have their own life cycles that they want to put together. All of this has to be brought together in some way, shape, or form. Was anybody here last year at Mobile First? So one of the things we had last year, so John Bulow spoke from Kimberly-Clark, he did a keynote. He spent a month putting together some of the best material I have ever seen in terms of app development hand guides, end of life or life cycle management guides on applications. This is one of the things that our professional services, our advisory services have built out a number of resources to help you with as well, because it becomes critical. This right here is one of the most important components in being able to drive the peripheral innovation in the organization and the central management of it all. If you can enable people to build applications to a standard and give them simple tools so that they don't have to think it through for themselves, you will exponentially move the innovation needle and the amount of applications that you can handle. And through automation, you bring that all together, and now you have a central way to be able to manage those applications in a unified and consistent manner. This is like the holy grail of app management and mobility, really. When you get to the business transformation component, the thing that you will know through blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of built up scar tissue is that innovation always equals instability. You think about the fact that we're really 5 to 7 years down the mobile journey. If you look at mobility on an iOS device, it almost seems like it's a ubiquitous technology. And then go ahead and look at Google. Right? What they're doing with Android for work, it's all brand new. It's just getting started. Microsoft getting into the mobility game with Windows 10 and trying to bring sort of the desktop and the operating system on mobile devices together. It's brand new. Like, neither of these are fully to market in a mature way, so we're starting over in many respects on how this is going to happen. And we're seeing the growing pains that Google is wrestling through, that Microsoft is wrestling through. It's the same ones that Apple went through and continues to go through, right? iOS 9, 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.32, 9.3.1. So this is not easy. And by the time you get to business transformation, you will have made it a part of you, the fact that innovation equals instability, and it becomes a cultural component of what you do. All right. A couple of quick things as a heads up that we can share today. First of all, BYOD. Right, 2011, we all thought that meant bring any device you want and it's going to be really, really cool. We now know that's not true. It's not bring any device. It's really be very careful about what devices you bring and make sure that it fits within a defined set of criteria that your organization can manage to. Now, some of my closest friends in mobilities have to manage every single device. They will tell you it is very, very painful. And by the way, for those of you taking pictures, my email will be up here at the end. I'm happy to send you these slides. So, yeah, that way. So happy to do that for you. So BYOD is not any device as you're starting to get started. As you move into applications, there's no lord of the apps. There is no one app to rule them all. There is not necessarily, there's most likely, and if there is, I've never seen it be done successfully, there's not one app that's going to deploy across every operating system and do everything that you need it to. The concept of the micro app and the concept of OS specific, unless you're really starting to drill down into web apps and using kind of back-end resources to manage that stuff, it's going to be different. You're going to have to allow a lot of creativity that exists in the environment. And then the last one is that as you go through this process, there's going to be restructuring that's going to happen. It's going to happen at an organizational level, just for the sheer sake of you being able to function in a sort of multidisciplinary environment. And secondly, there's going to be opportunities. There's going to be opportunities for you to move up, and there's going to be opportunities for you to begin to exert domain expertise and mobility. My guess is most of you feel like you are on the back end of mobility and trying to get caught up. You are not. You are still on the front end. The early adopters and the innovators, they've had their day, but this thing still is not to maturity. You are still the people that are going to be in the place to create mobility, and within your organizations, you will be leaders in terms of what goes on. All right, I'm just going to spend a minute on this. Let me look and see where we're at on the time. I know it's late in the day. I appreciate that you've had a lot of information. So on this is the process that we see organizations go through. You have an adoption use case. There's something that you need to accomplish. No plan ever exists once it gets out into the wild. It's just the way it is. So you will see hurdles. All of the customers that I have worked with in my life have seen hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. So one of the key things that we've seen successful companies do is clearly define their hurdles in 3 categories. They talk about hurdles that they hit from a people perspective, not having sort of the right competency in the organization, not having enough competency in the organization, right, the capacity, and not having the right people in the conversation. This goes back to the Mobility Center of Excellence. We've got the competency in the organization, but we still haven't figured out how to organize it in a way that makes sense. Second, there's the processes that you're going to have to put in place. All of the HR processes, communication processes, your change processes are likely going to have to change in some way, shape, or form. The way that you communicate with business units and make opportunities, all of this has to be figured out. And I'll show you where you can, on our community website, the support website, the portal, I'll show you where you can go to get a huge amount of resource on this. We've spent years building out materials that will help you start to process through this and think it through. And then the last component is technology. So for all of the hurdles that we can overcome with technology, I always know that somebody is going to find a use case where it gets around what we're able to do, and you're going to have to figure something out. Right? There's always going to be a little bit of duct tape and some shoestring and anything that you put together for the most part. And so understanding what those pieces are and how you go about solving them is really important. And then let me look at a couple of things that we provide, and this will really sort of start you on an exploration of what we have. There's a couple of different places we solve for this. So again, if you've never seen it, we have a number of toolkits that are built out on our site that are all available to you, and they're free. Toolkits on application development, toolkits on BYOD. Our BYOD toolkit is industry recognized as one of the best resources to be able to take an end-to-end setup and deployment of mobility, how to get the right stakeholders involved, sample documents, sample processes, all of these types of things that already exist that we've built out for you that really give you a simple place to start and to get that information under your belt. Professional services, our professional services leverages this framework to have a conversation with you, to talk about what does it take to get mobility up and running. And I have seen organizations that leverage professional services typically have a faster time to market and success with mobility than organizations that don't. I'm not saying that it's not that way for every organization. I've seen some organizations that absolutely are amazing. Most likely those are yours, but for the organizations that do have some opportunities for growth, this is what I like to let them know, that we have professional services that sit down and help you think through piece by piece by piece all of the different components, get all the hurdles laid out, and then give you an opportunity to start building the solutions, technology, peoples, and process to make that successful. Okay, so we talked about this morning in one of the keynotes I think O just talked about. Has anybody taken the mobility maturity assessment yet? Okay, excellent, very, very good, all of you. You can pick up your buttons. afterwards. The rest of you, you can pick up your buttons too, because I love the fact that you were here, so thank you very much. I appreciate that. But for those of you who haven't taken it, it's worth it. It's about, was it 10 minutes? 10? Okay, 15 minutes for those of you who are slow. There's no judgment here. If it takes you 15 minutes, that's okay. But this will give you kind of a sense of where are you at in comparison to some of the other organizations we have. I don't put that out there. I don't think you should use that necessarily to judge yourself compared to other organizations. All organizations are created independently, and in our eyes, you're all special. Two ways though that I've seen this help. Number one, C-level executives like to know where they stack up. I don't know what it is in their DNA, but I think some of it's just competitive. And if you can demonstrate that there's areas where you're behind, oftentimes that will get you additional resources. If that's a help to you, fantastic. The other thing it'll give you a sense of where you're at in this journey. My guess is that since this is not rocket scientists, you have a sense. But my hope is that those two tools together will give you an opportunity to frame the mobile discussion and be able to enter it more intelligently and bring a number of different people there to discuss what's going on. Professional services, you can just reach out to your account executive. It's as simple as setting up a 1-hour scoping call and asking them what are the types of things that they can help you with, and to see if this framework starts to give you some places where you see some areas where our professional services can help accelerate the mobility initiative. This just references our community, .mobileiron.com resources. If you get on there and you go to Essential Insights, it's on the left-hand navigation, all this stuff is there for you. Again, it's an overwhelming amount of information. Some of you will like that. Some of you will want to throw up on your keyboard. Either way, at least you know it's there for you, and you know that we have a lot of scar tissue built up in the learnings that go into these toolkits. And then finally, one of the things that we are finalizing, I've been working with a number of people in the organization, is this presentation in a full format. So you can imagine we could probably do this over several hours. We could do it on site. We could have somebody, a number of different levels of our organization present this for a company that really wants to say, we know we're not totally getting our arms around the conversation and we need some help. We can bring this in and do that conversation with you. So there's my email. If you have any questions, happy to answer those. You can send me an email. If you're interested in something like this, let me know as well. I'll get in touch with your account executive and we'll see about setting something up. Anybody have any questions? It is my sincere hope that this has been beneficial. I'm glad that you're here. Thank you so much. And I love that we could spend this time together. So thank you guys. Have a great rest of the week. Yeah.